It's time for the healthy eating tip of the week, and I said you're not going to like me today because it's anarchy. I'm going to talk about sugar. Okay, we know as parents and as teachers how important it is that our kids be as nutritionally supported as possible, right? Because we're constantly trying to set our kids up for success. Isn't that what we're trying to do? We're trying to set ourselves up for success, and we're trying to set them up for success. Sometimes, some days, we all have an off day where we let our kids stay up too late, they get overtired, or we let them eat things. I think that's you got to live your life, right? And you need to enjoy your life. However, I just want to make the case for being as healthy as possible and giving them as much of a ritual as possible. What happens? We talked yesterday about a bedtime ritual and making sure that we uphold. It's hard work, but it's not as hard as dealing with the tantrums that come when we don't. Right? I know, I don't always think of it that way either. But when we can think of that, it's certainly, I think it becomes easier to uphold the ritual. I was just talking to somebody this morning about somebody that I know who is absolutely rigid about making sure that their child gets enough sleep and that they're, completely, that's the filter that they go through. If you want to go to an event, they're like, nope, my child has to be in bed by this time. And on the one hand, we all kind of roll our eyes a little bit, except that what I really appreciate is that child is a lot more level than everybody else's child, certainly a lot more level than my child, that they aren't prone to all these emotional outbursts that we see, that we, sometimes we go, okay, well, it's just par for the course. Kids are going to have tantrums, but a lot of times meltdowns happen as a result of other things, and sometimes it can be nutritional, and sometimes it can be blood sugar, and sometimes it can be not having enough rest. What I like to think about is if we just try to get our heads around being as healthy as possible. And I'm not saying that sugar is a bad thing. I'm picking my words carefully here, right? I'm not saying sugar is a bad thing. Like all things in moderation, most things tend to be okay. Moderation is the thing that's difficult for our kids, especially when something is particularly good to them. So if you can give your child just a little bit of sugar from time to time and your child can deal with it okay and their behavior stays the same, then you're fine. But if you see that your child isn't capable of just having a little bit of sugar, which is the case with a lot of our kids, or that when your child has a bit of sugar on board, that their ability to control their behavior is either that much harder or impossible. I go to birthday parties all the time with, mostly neurotypical kids, and I sit there and watch what happens, and I am frightened. I know that for my child, his little ecosystem is so delicate that we don't do sugar at all. And I'm not suggesting that all of you need to stop sugar altogether, right? I'm not saying that to you. I'm saying look at your individual child and see what can your child take. If my child has a big piece of fruit, he gets a little on the silly side. Actually, a big piece of fruit, he gets a lot on the silly side. Who am I kidding here? So we have to monitor even the amount of fruit that he has. And over the years, as he's gotten older, he can handle more and more and more because he's now aware of it. Sometimes we love to go to the farmer's market on Sunday and they have the free samples. And he gets the free samples of this fruit, that fruit, and the other thing. He just loves it. And he'll feel himself starting to get silly, and I'll notice that he'll have a little bit of behavior going on, and I'll say, dude, what's happening over there? And he's like, I might have had a little too much fruit. I can feel it happening. And then we have a conversation about, does he have the self-restraint? But we're talking, he's almost 9. There's no way that he could have done that when he was 4. So we just really rationed fruit. But for you in your home, if you take a look at your child and say, okay, I think birthday parties are a sensory nightmare, and there's all that's going on too. And a lot of times, you leave the birthday party and there's a little bit of behavior afterwards because there's a lot of noise, but it's also a lot of sugar. It's a lot of sugar. And our kids have enough problems having to be able to control what's happening in their bodies and the way they feel, that we don't need to make it harder. So my assignment for you, if you're willing, and I told you you're going to hate me, is to at least take a week, and I'm not saying change anything in this week, but take a look and keep a record of how much sugar your child is having, when they have it. And we talked about antecedent behavior and consequence. Well, sugar is more of an EO, an establishing operation, than an antecedent, right? But I want you to kind of keep a record of, you give your child sugar and what happens. What happens when you give your child sugar, and how often you give your child sugar, because I think what a lot of people don't realize is how much sugar is in the diet. And then once you've looked at it for a week, and then you can look back and say, okay, well, here is in fact what's going on. Then you can make decisions about, do I need to scale back? And if you do, to see what happens as a result. I think it's really important, unless there's a health issue, to not do things cold turkey, right? It's not necessarily good for us, and it's not necessarily good for our kids. So if your child has been having a tremendous amount of sugar, you probably don't want to go to no sugar all in one fell swoop, unless you're really at a point where your child's sugar level is of health concern, in which case you might want to do cold turkey under a doctor's care. But to take a look at it, see exactly how much sugar your child is having, noting, are you getting behavior issues around when your child has sugar? Was your child doing okay in the morning, and then there was a lollipop at lunch, and now the behavior in the afternoon, not so good? We just saw, I mentioned that my son was doing STAR testing, and so it was, I think, 8 days. And during those 8 days, there was a reinforcement snack during the testing, so that normally the kids, they have school in the morning, and then they get a snack, and then they come back and they have lessons, and then they have lunch, and then they come back and learn, and then they go home. Well, now, during the testing, what they did, because they wanted the kids to stay sharp, was they had a bit of a snack in between in the morning before there was snack time. So it was 2 snacks instead of 1. And we had asked, because my son's on a very specific diet, to know what they were having. But it ended up being a lot of fruit stuff. So for the other kids, maybe it wasn't as bad sugar-wise, but for my son, it was, top in the max. And, we thought he could handle it and he would be okay, and it would be fine. And what we heard back, though, on a regular, I don't know why I'm laughing, it's not that funny. What we heard back was that he was great for the testing, but every afternoon last week he was struggling, and the teacher said, I don't know whether it's just the focusing on the test, but his behavior, he was really silly in the afternoons. I've never seen anything like, that's what happens when you give him fruit in the morning. So you pick your battles. But in any case, take a look at your child. See what's happening in your child's ecosystem in relation to sugar. Make an informed choice. And think to yourself, I think what a lot of people find is that they go, oh, my child really doesn't have that much sugar. They just really don't have that much sugar. And then when you start to keep a chart of it, you go, oh, my goodness. Well, yeah, there was sugar in the pancakes that I gave her this morning. And oh, and then, there was that lollipop around noon. And then, there was a piece of candy. Oh, wait a second. This is ending up being a lot of sugar for a little body. Take a look at it before you decide to do anything, and see, because if your child is fine with it, your child's weight is fine, and their health is fine, and their blood tests come back and they're fine, and you're not seeing any behaviors around the sugar, you might be fine. But for a lot of our kids, there are lots of things to consider. And then you can slowly start to wean them off of sugar, and while you're doing that, you're replacing it with fresh fruit and really high sugar vegetables, things like peppers. But again, those are on the Dirty Dozen list, so make sure you get those organic, or at least grown by a farmer who isn't spraying. All right, keep an eye on the sugar.